On this channel, as well as just my professional research work, I try to figure out what the major socioeconomic and macro trends that the mainstream will be discussing a few years from now today. And there's a lot of stuff in plain sight that is going on that people just don't really think about until either the results of an election surprise people and or some economic shock happens and makes this structural imbalance or this social change become just more clear to people who have otherwise been putting their head in the sand. And in this case, I'm going to be talking about the convergence potentially between blue and white collar labor. Hello, I am Nick Pardini from Davos Macro Research, and welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. Today, I'm going to be talking about a trend which I started to notice really since 2020, but has really started to accelerate, and that is the idea of the convergence of blue and white collar wages. I've seen, like with the recent trends in the employment market, the highest concentration and increase in layoffs has been amongst higher paying office jobs, particularly in finance and tech, where the places that have the strongest wage growth have been in blue collar manufacturing and heavy equipment operation. And wages where they have been rising the fastest have been either in historically blue collar union protected industries or in lower end, low skilled work. And they've been rising even without minimum wages rising necessarily. And there are a few reasons why this could be happening. First, declining immigration rates. You've recently had some issues on the border currently in the U.S., but globally, and also pre-2021, even in the U.S., the trend had been declining rates of immigration, which had suppressed the lower end of the wage scale. And by suppressing the lower end of the wage scale with plenty of new entrants, it brought down the whole wage curve as a whole. Now, with boomers retiring, less immigration, and smaller cohorts of Gen Z coming into the workforce to replace the boomers, there's a lower supply of labor. And then in addition to that, with the social pressures of going to college and always trying to work at some more socially prestigious white-collar job, there's a relatively higher supply of new entrants for the white-collar labor force versus the blue-collar labor force. And that is causing wage compression. You've seen this, especially if you adjust for cost of living, because a lot of these high-paid, high-skilled corporate jobs happen to still be in the most expensive metro areas of the country, whereas some of these blue-collar jobs tend to be in much more affordable parts of the country. An example of this is jobs that you find in some of these rural places that are working at warehouses or distribution centers or wherever the future new factories are being built are starting to be listed on job sites such as Indeed, where they will pay relatively low-skilled warehouse workers $28 an hour, which is $56,000 a year, assuming you work a full-time year and full-time hours, 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year, in a place where the average house costs $140,000. That would be like if you lived in Los Angeles, the equivalent of making $300,000 plus a year in terms of how far your money goes for housing, which is based on CPI metrics and just common sense. It's the biggest portion of people's budgets, anywhere from 30 to 45% of disposable spending after tax is going towards housing. And it's not just Roswell, New Mexico. I've been driving around the country to visit large parts of middle America the last few years, and one of the more common things I've been seeing is advertisements on the road for job fairs for relatively low-skilled work, such as truck drivers, factory workers, warehouse operators, logistical people, etc., for $40, $50 an hour to live in relatively small towns in places like Wisconsin, Illinois, Louisiana, Indiana, Arizona, etc., where the cost of living are a fraction of the big cities. So in terms of real pay and real standard of living, that's rapidly going up for a lot of blue-collar labor. Whereas on the other side, you see white-collar jobs being less plentiful. You're seeing the same wages not going up as much for service level and corporate type jobs. In fact, they're really going down, especially in technology, where the overpaid staff has been laid off and moved down around. The example they like to look at is Twitter, or now called X, where since Elon Musk took it over, they've laid off 75% of their staff, yet they haven't really seen any operational declines. It's a private company, so I don't really know how their bottom line has been affected or what other variables has affected their bottom line given the craziness going on at that company. I think it does nevertheless show a working model of how a lot of these technology companies could be run a lot more efficiently than they actually are. And I wouldn't be surprised to see private equity or other smart investors swoop in, buy these companies, and then slash the payroll and maintaining the same base operations, and as a result, greatly increase margins. And this is going to disproportionately hurt white-collar and college-educated labor force. And this is not even counting like the increased cost of student loan service for a lot of these people and how that erodes your real cost of living and tax-adjusted income. And so what is the implications of this, both economically and socially? One, I think a lot of the middle of the road states, like basically the region that was the Big 12 conference before a recent round of conference realignment, is probably going to outperform in terms of economic growth for the foreseeable future. Also, you're probably going to see a return of relative strength to some parts of rural America and that previously had been completely hollowed out, especially as onshoring of manufacturing continues. We're already starting to see consequences in declining college enrollment. College enrollment's been falling for a long time just simply because of the shrinking sizes of younger generations demographically. But also a lot of young people, especially young men, have decided not to want to go to school because they can make a lot more money doing a more blue-collar, lower-skilled job right out of school, right out of high school, versus going to university and waiting another 4 years to get paid, take on debt, and may not be guaranteed a job that pays the same as to what they can get right now. And this has caused a major gender gap to rise in the university system. The other consequence of this is very political. The future fault lines of politics have completely changed. Historically, it was based on ethnic differences, urban versus rural, and other common tropes. However, now, I think the main divider in some of these politics, beyond religion or ethnicity or geography, is going to be, do you make more money than you have social prestige? Or do you make less money than what your social prestige would imply that you do? One party is going to be the party of those who are more productive than what their education and credentials say they should be. And the other party is going to be those who have the credentials and education, but don't really make as much money as they should given their level of education and credentials. The example would be, say, like an HVAC technician who makes $100,000 a year and did not complete any sort of university education, versus a journalist or a adjunct college professor who had a master's degree but makes, say, $50,000 a year. One person in this group has more income than social status. Like, he's making good money, he probably lives in a much lower cost of living city, so has a lot more take-home pay than the people in the other category. But in terms of social prestige and where he is viewed in society is much lower than the other person who makes a lot less money and works in that academic job or journalist job and has the 4-year degree plus a master's, but their take-home pay, especially after tax and potential debt service, is much lower than the same guy as the HVAC technician. And even if they made the same amount of money nominally, let's say they're both making $100,000 a year in this example, the HVAC guy still is probably financially coming ahead because he's able to live in a lower cost of living city and has less debt service. So that tension is really, it's the root of our politics. And I think that explains a lot of the recent education polarization. Like people say, oh, you just because you went to university, you're either being indoctrinated by the left or you're just too smart for conservative ideas. I think neither of those are true. Instead, you just have a democratization of who's been going to university, and the same type of class of people who are graduating from universities are not getting the same kind of jobs that they were previously. Their real pay is lower, and they feel like, oh, since I went to college or I got a master's or I have this kind of academic prestige, I should be in the social stratum that's historically the 150K plus social stratum right away. And yet I'm not doing as well as some HVAC technician or some warehouse worker at Roswell, New Mexico. And I have to live in a city where I can't even barely afford to make rent, and my studio apartment is more than mortgages. And this creates bitter resentment. These people feel like they deserve, because of all the hard work they put into their education, to have a certain standing in society that financially, in terms of their income, matches the social prestige of completing their education and or other career accomplishments. And so they think like, wait, I deserve more. It doesn't make sense that these people who skipped a lot of these steps are making more money than me. And it's not just HVAC technicians. It could be a small business owner who started a business with only a bachelor's degree compared to somebody who got a PhD and is working at a Wall Street firm. Or it could be a doctor who's making less money than somebody who, again, like that same small business owner who only got a bachelor's degree or lawyer. And this is causing the anger, is that now the new, they call this the precariat class. Some of them are just the educated creative classes. Their incomes, especially just for living in expensive cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, etc., are not, in terms of actual living standards and take-home pay, are not as high as they feel like they deserve given their social prestige. And the other way around, with the blue-collar people who are making the same kind of real money, but they are treated like they're second-class citizens, or they're just dumb, backward, hicky people, and they want more social prestige and recognition for their effort. And they're like, hey, wait, I'm more productive than you in the hard economic sense, but since I don't have some fancy degrees or didn't work at some big corporation, why does society look down on me and think I'm inferior? And this is why it's getting so heated and personal. Also explains the gender gap, because the people who are more likely to be make more than their education implies level tend to be men, not because men are inherently better at careers, they just don't go to university or graduate school as frequently. And the people who are more likely to go through the traditional education prestige path tend to more likely be women. And so that explains both the education divide and the gender divide that is increasing in politics. And this has become more clear with younger generations who have more student loan balances due to higher college costs and don't have their housing costs grandfathered in from buying properties when they were cheaper. So they're paying either higher rents or higher mortgages than their parents had to for the same level of house, inflation adjusted. And that creates more social tension. So it's really just the relative decline in pay without the decline in social prestige, which has caused the political divide. It's really, the root is the university. Not for the university, it's having some better ideas or indoctrination, depending on which side the camp you're on, but more just the fact that there's this income tension that is causing a lot of the polarization in our politics. If you like this type of content, please comment. I'd like to make a discussion. Do you think that the political orientation of our country is really just a product of economic resentment that is not really showing up in polling data? Have you seen the convergence of blue versus white collar wages in your part of the country? Or if you're an international viewer, has this trend held or is happening in your country? I've noticed this in the United States, but I don't really know if it's happening in other parts of the world. Again, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share. And if you like these more like bigger picture idea one type videos versus my more fixed series, also please comment and increase the engagement, because that gives me an idea of what type of content you guys actually like doing on this channel. Thank you for watching.